The content presented is for entertainment purposes only. Some content may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. You know, there's a lot of things that I'm struggling with. I'm doing some pretty dark topics out of late, so I apologize. Hopefully there's going to be some more happier news, or at least some more, I guess, less dark news. I don't know. It seems like anything that's really negative or bad happening are always the ones that end up up in the news. You know, so there was a recent shooting out in Michigan, and a lot of you didn't know, but I actually worked up in Michigan for a few weeks, and it's really pretty up there, up north of Indiana, I believe. But yeah, I really wanted to move out there at one point. It's really pretty out east. So the suspect, Ethan Crumley, 15, was charged Wednesday with 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of terrorism causing death, 7 counts of assault with intent to murder, and 12 counts of possession of a firearm in the commission of a felony. He is being charged as an adult and was arraigned later Wednesday. Oakland County Prosecutor Karen McDonald said at a news conference that the shooting Tuesday at Oxford High School was planned, not just an impulsive act. There is a mountain of digital evidence, videotape, social media, all digital evidence possible. And it absolutely, we are confident that we can show it was premeditation, she told reporters. I don't know what it is, but it seems like whenever I do these by myself, I get really, really nervous and really anxious, and I forget to breathe. This is going to be interesting. I haven't looked to see if there's a lot of anti-gun stuff going on right now, but it seems that anytime there is a mass shooting, anytime there was, any gun-related violence that creeps into the media, it seems like that's that button of we should ban firearms, we should take away firearms, or they talk about assault rifles, which is nonsense. It's just a rifle. I don't know why they call them assault rifles. I think they do it because it sounds more menacing. That's just my opinion. But what's really interesting is that most shootings like this, which is really interesting that that Miss McDonald told them that they're pretty sure it was planned and not impulsive, is unfortunately that these things do happen, and it is really sad. But there is almost always a motive, which is interesting, because it's not just like, oh yeah, I just decided one day to go out and just start shooting people with this gun I got. That's not always the case, and it's actually pretty rare when that happens. Usually there's a plan in place. Usually people have a motive, or what we know as a reason why they did it. But it's always interesting to see why people do the things that they do. So apparently the gun was purchased by the suspect's father, which is also very interesting. But there were a total of 225 plus shootings by May of 2021. So there's actually a lot of, I mean, across the country, there's still a lot of violence. I don't know if that means mass shootings, like at a school or whatever, but this particular article cited that there was about 225 plus shootings by May 2021, which is obviously more than what we'd want. Obviously, we'd want zero. We want this to be a perfect world. We don't want people to get hurt. We don't want people feelings to be hurt to the point where they feel like this is a necessity to retaliate against people. And it's always sad and it's always heartbreaking when we read about it, when we see it, when it's blasted in the news. And then, of course, people take advantage of that to try to push in, laws against firearms, which is nonsense. Has anyone else seen that crime has increased due to the pandemic and defunding the police? Statistics are saying yes. If you watched a couple episodes back, there's definitely an increase, especially in large cities. And what's really interesting is Democrat-run cities, which is really interesting. So it seems that a lot of these places where we're having increased violence, not only with guns, but just in general, more rioting, more looting, and things like that in some of these hotspot areas, it's definitely increased. And it's, and I think that is not only a direct result of defunding the police and cutting back on manpower and things like that, and basically neutering a lot of the officers that put their lives on the line to ensure that people are safe during these demonstrations, but also removing their ability to go in and stop it. Like they just basically let it go until it dies down, and then they go in and kind of clean up afterwards. And I think that's a disservice to business owners. I think that's a disservice to the people in those communities. I think it's a disservice to people just want to generally be safe when they're walking around in these places that these demonstrations are occurring. Also, there wasn't any talk about any police on site during the shooting. So where was the police? Now, in some of these bigger cities, like I grew up in the suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona, so they're definitely a lot bigger than the rural southern Utah where we're living right now. Excuse me. And I just remember that there was always between like 2 or 3 different officers who, patrol the school and stuff like that. I think my graduating class was around 700-800 kids, somewhere around there. Maybe it was less. No, I don't know. I think we had a pretty big graduating class. I can't remember off the top of my head, and obviously I don't have my yearbook in front of me. But I do remember there was always a police presence. Not just the the DARE officers that were there, but just like fully uniformed officers were always just walking around, and especially saw them during lunchtime and when there was high foot traffic. Before and after school, and during the times when people, were out and about during, in between periods. And I just always remember feeling like I never felt like I was in any serious danger. So I always wonder, when these school shootings happens, where was, the police force? Did they have, police on site? I think nowadays, ever since the Columbine shooting back in the 90s, I want to say early 90s, Columbine shooting date. I want to say it was 92. No, it was late 90s. April 20th, 1999 at 11:19 a.m. Wow. And I have a lot of opinions, on these kinds of things, because I really do believe that there should be a small police, presence on school. Like, obviously, like, not only hopefully deterring kids from like having fights at school. Like, luckily I haven't had too many fights at schools, but although what was really interesting is going from grade school to high school, I felt like there was more school violence when I was in grade school. And my high school was literally like, 5 blocks away. It's not very far from the grade school that I grew up in. But I got in a lot of fights in grade school. Like, sadly, like I ended up fighting like 2 of my best friends because they were being turds, and well, one of them was being a turd. The other one, I was kind of being a turd, and I like kind of coaxed him into fighting me because I was just getting annoyed with him. And that's, when you're in grade school, you do stupid things and you live and you learn. But I remember there were some kids, like, it were predominantly like Latino and white kids, but there was a particular individual who, for some reason, decided because I was the biggest, I wasn't the biggest, like I wasn't terribly like fat, but I was definitely the tallest for sure. Like, I had my growth spurt when I was like in 6th grade or something like that. I was like 6 foot before I even entered high school. I was a very tall kid. But for some reason it seemed like because you're the tallest, that means you're the biggest. And, I had to show, it seemed like kids felt like they had to show their dominance in grade school by picking fights with the biggest, tallest kids in school. And so I would always end up running. I actually wasn't too bad at running. I was pretty quick, especially when I thought kids were going to beat me up. So when I was in high school though, yeah, I didn't feel, felt like I was in any immediate danger. But yeah, like, it's important to have that kind of presence in high school to obviously deter kids from, bringing firearms and, knives and stuff to school, which you shouldn't. You should leave those at home, obviously. But I don't understand why we can't have volunteered teachers who go through, safety training. Maybe they go through like the academies, safety and firearms, like from the police or, military or whatever, field we need to do. This is kind of my thought process, because I really feel like there are teachers out there that are good people, good-hearted people, and they're willing to protect their students. And I believe if they would like to volunteer, or, or they can get paid to get a little pay bump, to carry a firearm with them at all times, concealed carry permit, everything registered. Like, I think that's really important. Like, I think if a firearm is used, in some kind of shooting, obviously you need to be able to trace it to whoever owns it. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to find the perpetrator, but at least you'll know where it came from and kind of figure out maybe it was a friend that borrowed it, or it was a father, or whatever the case may be. I think that's helpful in the long run. But I think it would be a really interesting idea to see how many teachers would be willing to do that. They said, hey, we're willing to give you an extra, I don't know, extra $6,000 a year if you're willing to get your concealed carry, conceal and carry a firearm, and go through the training with the police department. I wonder if there would be individuals who would be willing to do that. And then also, a couple times a year, in addition to doing your fire drills, you have safety drills for, in case somebody has a deadly weapon on campus or whatever. And I think there should be like a gun safe in those, in those classrooms, and they should be able to have like a tactical rifle, like a armor light, an AR. I think those are really appropriate in those kind of things, because they could respond so much faster. Because this is what goes through my mind, okay? So let's say a shooting starts happening. Kids are on their cell phones calling the police, calling their parents or whatever. The first couple of calls are going to be like, there's, a kid, probably pretending he has something there. And then eventually they go, oh, yeah, there's actually something going down. And then they suit up, they get SWAT, they get, everybody out there, and it could take anywhere from 5, 10, 15. I mean, some responses can take 20 or 30 minutes before they get, everybody out there that you need out there. It takes it takes time. All their officers are all over the place, patrolling, different parts of the city. So I don't know. I just think that could be a reasonable option to help curb some of these shootings, because I think that if kids know that they have teachers, like they don't even have to name them, like they could be anonymous as far as that's concerned. Like they don't need to be like prancing around, be like, oh yeah, I have a concealed carry and, I have my AR, locked up in this gun safe and, tucked in the back of the closet of the room or whatever the case may be. But just if kids knew, and if they decide that, hey, I'm gonna go and shoot up my school for whatever reason they have, there would at least be some kind of response very quickly. Number one, if something does happen, but number two, I think it would be a big deterrent. If they're just like, yeah, we have 10% of our faculty that are concealed carries, and they got it tucked away in a way where no one would ever know. I think that would be helpful, in my opinion. So one of the links I have, it actually has a link with all the different states that absolutely will refuse to sell a firearm to individuals with unsound minds, which is really cool. And I think that's really important, because if somebody has a history of suicidal ideation, obviously they shouldn't have deadly weapons in their possession. They shouldn't have deadly weapons within reasonable reach. Not reach, but you know what I'm saying. Like, that should not be something that's appropriate. But then it also begs the question, what does an unsound mind mean? And that gets into another basket of interesting things to discuss. So I got a couple of things from this, which I thought was really interesting. So I'm going to quote these from here. The Bureau may deny, suspend, or revoke a concealed firearm permit if the applicant or permit holder has been or adjudicated by a state or federal court as mentally incompetent, unless the adjudication has been withdrawn or reversed. So it's just, fancy legal terms, it's just saying that as long as they're of sound mind, they can have it. And if they believe that is of sound mind now, they can reverse it and they can have a permit, obviously. Mental health evaluation to include statement regarding nature of commitment, finding or adjudication that resulted in restriction on petitioner's ability to purchase or possess a dangerous weapon, petitioner's previous and current mental health treatment, petitioner's previous violent behavior, if any, petitioner's current mental health medications and medication management, length of time petitioner has been stable, external factors that may influence petitioner's stability. Wow, there's a lot of these. Ability petitioner to maintain stability with or without medication, whether the petitioner is dangerous to public safety. So a lot of these different codes is obviously focused on case-by-case basis, because and they probably would have to have doctor's notes and stuff like that, I would assume, especially if there's somebody that has a history of mental illness and they are, they got their meds good to go, they've been taking them steadily over the years. Obviously it's important to look at those factors, I think. So yeah, I think it's important that individuals who are mentally, you know, unable to, you know what I mean. I think it's important that individuals who are mentally and or medically a danger to themselves or others should not own a firearm. I think that's pretty smart, because obviously we don't want those individuals to hurt themselves or hurt others. I mean, that makes sense to me. And I think, people should have, criminal and medical background checks before, they have their conceal and carry. I think that's important. I think that's important stuff. What's really interesting is when we get down to the nitty gritty, as far as like, barrel length or bump stocks, or, how many rounds can be held in a magazine. I mean, there's some really silly laws. I think California comes to mind, where you can only have like 5 rounds in a firearm. And I'm just like, that doesn't necessarily, if you get in a position where you need to protect yourself, here's the situation. If somebody's coming after you, let's say they have a knife, you've told them to stay away. You told them to leave you alone. Don't come near me. You have your firearm out and they're still pursuing you, and you shoot them in self-defense. Your body is in such shock and in such huge high doses of adrenaline just pumping through your veins at that point. More than likely, you might, especially if you're not like continually like practice shooting and stuff like that, and practice safety and things, like you're probably going to miss a few times. So let's say you've never been in that high stress situation, like you might get a couple of shots in out of 5. But I just think it's silly. And what if it's somebody who's on drugs? Like 5 shots isn't going to take somebody down who's high on meth. And again, I'm not a police officer. I'm not what are those people called? I'm not an attorney. I'm not a lawyer. These are just my thoughts and feelings on the whole situation. But yeah, I mean, there should be some restrictions. I just don't think round capacity should be one of them. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, I think focusing on making sure that the people that do get firearms in their possession, they have the criminal background, they have the medical background, and they feel that it's safe for them to have them. I mean, I don't think you need to do much more than that. But I mean, I would, if somebody has a different opinion on that, I would love to have my mind changed. So if you have some thoughts on the topic of the day, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Also, this episode is brought to you by viewers like you, so thank you so much. Hopefully we've earned your support today. You can best help us by hitting that red subscribe button, click that damn bell, and be notified of our content releases so you don't miss a thing. End advertisement. And when we're going back to talking about mental states, like how long, these are like really tough questions, and I'm glad I don't have to worry about these hard questions, because I don't know the answers to everything. Like, I really don't. Like, I'm as much of a consumer of this information as anybody else listening to these audios and these podcasts and such. But how long would it take for someone who was unable to pass, their background or medical background checks? Like, how long should it be before, they can reasonably own a firearm? Like, I don't have the answer to that. I would think maybe a year would be at least the minimum. I mean, I don't know how much more after that, to the point where you're just like, well, why should I even bother having a firearm? I just feel like I'm very grateful and very lucky to have moved myself and my wife into a place that's, fairly conservative. I mean, we're getting a lot of, transplants from, I was about to say implants, a lot of transplants from like California and New York and Oregon. Like, we're having a lot of people out in some of those like hotspot areas that are moving here, and honestly, welcome. It's a beautiful place to be in southern Utah. Excuse me. But don't California my Utah, please. So I'm curious if there's going to be more information talking about Crumbley's mental state and status, leading up to the time of the shooting. Like, they say they have like all these ample evidences of that was a premeditated shooting, but I'm just curious of like what that entails. Like, is it just like, pictures of them out, doing target practice, or is it like search history of like floor plans of the school? And I mean, even that, I mean, it's not real. I mean, to me, it just kind of depends on the situation. If it's like, okay, and now like here's like the drawn out plans of where I would enter and where I'd exit and which classrooms I would hit and which individuals I was looking for. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see some more information when it comes out. So they believe that, it was premeditated. This is another article. I'm absolutely sure after reviewing the evidence that it isn't even a close call. It was absolutely premeditated, says Karen McDonald. Mountain of digital evidence, which could mean anything. We're also considering charges against the boy's parents. The authorities said previously that the suspect's father bought the gun 4 days before the shooting, and that the boy had apparently posted a photo of the weapon with a target on social media. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean a weapon with, target practice. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to shoot up a school, but I digress. There are facts leading up to the shooting that suggest this was not just an impulsive act. Charging the person as an adult is necessary to achieve justice and protect the public. Any other option would put all of us at risk of this person because they could be released and still a threat. Which, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, obviously, I mean, again, it depends on the situation. I mean, is this kid somebody who has been violent in the past, and he was on medication and he went off his medication and he's just like, I'm going to go crazy? I don't know. I mean, even then, like four dead, and gosh, how many were hurt total? 12 total counts of possession. Oh, that's something different. 7 counts of assault and intent to murder. 4 counts first degree. So 4 people died. 7 were assaulted. Jeez. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, like in the actual, what they call it, deposition, the trial or whatever. I mean, it makes sense that he is going to be tried as an adult, obviously. I mean, when life is lost, like it's going to be really difficult to plea insanity. Like, and it's, I mean, especially with the past of people pleading insanity and then finding out later that they weren't insane, they're just really, really smart. It's going to be really interesting to see, like, if this person was of sound mind at the time and leading up to what happened. I find it interesting that they're going to possibly charge the father with from negligence because of the firearm. And that's going to be some interesting reasoning there, because, like, let's say the father purchased the firearm, but it was locked up, and put away, and he only knew the code, but the kid found out about the code and then opened it up and took it out. That's going to be very different than the father purchased a firearm, put it in a drawer, kid stumbled upon it and took it. So it's going to be really interesting because, well, I grew up around firearms. Like I shot rifles and handguns, quite often growing up and being in Boy Scouts and stuff like that. But I was also taught, very young and early age to respect firearms and to treat them as they are always loaded. And if you are past a firearm, you need to check and make sure there's, if there is a round, obviously in the chamber, if it has a magazine in it, if it's full of rounds. Like there's steps that you go through to make sure that for sure what's going to happen when you pull that trigger. And number two, you don't point at anything that you're not going to defend yourself with. Like you're in the process of defending yourself if you're pointing it at somebody. Like you obviously don't want to point at anybody you don't want to harm. And those are some very simplistic terms. But so I'm just kind of curious what was going through this kid's head, when he was deciding he was going to take a firearm to school, and fire it upon kids. Now, I think if I remember correctly, in one of these articles, it talks about how they're unsure of the motive, and they thought that it was possibly due to bullying, and this kid decided to go back and do this really heinous, very dark, and very sad act. But I think they said they couldn't find any evidence on that. So it's like what goes through a kid's mind to say, I don't like some of the people at my school. School sucks. I'm going to end people's lives. Like kids nowadays are exposed to so much. And yes, there's definitely some desensitization as far as watching very violent movies or playing very, very violent video games. Some of the video games are pretty, crazy. But it's just I really want to listen to some of this and kind of figure out what's going on, because I find it fascinating. Every once in a while I get this true crime kick where I just want to kind of dive into these individuals' brains and be like, okay, well, what was your thought process when you went to the decision of, okay, I'm having a good, happy life, everything's going good, to now I want to kill people. It's where do you get from A to B? What was the thought process? Was it over a long period of time? Was it over a short period of time? Was it due to watching a lot of very violent movies or films, or, crazy stuff on the internet? What was the thing that led up to it? Was it because of, violent pornography? Was it because of, executions and stuff from videos from other countries where terrorists and gangsters and stuff were doing heinous things to people? What are the things that led up to that? I'm very curious, because I feel like there's always a reason, there's always a motive, and I think there's always steps that have occurred, where it was either decisions that were made that led up to it, or maybe there was poor things that happened in that person's life that led up to it, or of a combination of everything. There's got to be a lot of things that happen to get from point A to point B. And this is where psychology comes in. And I wish I had my buddy Alec here, who's, switching careers to psychology. Because then he can talk a little bit more about that. But I think it's sad, I think of all the times that I went to high school, and if something whenever something tragic happened at high school, there was somebody in some of my classes, I didn't know them intimately, but I knew of them, and we would talk every once in a while. And then all of a sudden one day they weren't coming to school, and I ask around, be like, hey, where did this person go? What, how come they're not coming to school anymore? Oh, you didn't hear, Jacob? No, I didn't hear. What's going on? Oh, well, these kids were, doing some cruising, and they decided to, a bunch of girls jumped in the backseat of a truck, and they thought it would be really fun to go, crazy and being reckless and driving. And, she fell out and hit her head and died. This stuff actually happened when I was in high school. And it was always sad, because it felt like the light of the world would get just a little bit dimmer when senseless violence and senseless deaths could have reasonably and easily been prevented. And it just blows my mind. You know? And I think it helps that we have like a more, police presence or like volunteers and stuff like that with safety and stuff like that. I think if we added teachers in that so they could be first responders to any kind of violence that's happening on the school, and they could legit like protect people and be there very, very quickly, before the even police get there. A lot of times that could be resolved and the police will just arrive and be like, well, I guess we're just going to be doing reports today, because our teacher volunteers, our guardians of the our guardian patrols of the high school, stopped the student from hurting anybody else. And they were able to negotiate with them, and they were able to stop them from, spilling more bullets at people. I don't know. I don't have the answers to everything. Like, I think that would be a really interesting idea to try out to see if that helped. I think we have a lot of lower shootings in places like Texas because, everybody's carrying a knife and a gun. Like, I thought that was something that was really interesting when I was living in Texas. Like, everybody like had a holster on their hip or under their arm, or, they had like a large hunting knife. Like, everybody was open carrying. And I didn't feel like, oh my goodness, my life is in danger. It was like, wow, I actually feel safer here because this person seemingly, I mean, I don't know the particular individuals, but I'm assuming that they're safe operators, of those firearms. And so I felt a little bit safer because if something happened, like I don't know if you guys remember it was like the premiere of, was it a Batman movie? Which one was it? Was it Batman, The Dark Knight? I think it was. Dark Knight, Batman shooting. 2012 Aurora, Colorado shooting. Century 16 movie theater in Aurora, Colorado, during midnight screening of the film Dark Knight Rises. Dressed in tactical clothing. Like, imagine if 10% of like 100 people in a movie theater was concealed carrying. Like, I just think that could have ended really quickly. And maybe we could have saved some people. I could be wrong. I don't know if I'm right. I just feel like there's a lot of things that could have been done. Things that could have been different. I think any large business that have a lot of individuals late at night, I feel like there should be more police presence. Not just like one cop. Maybe there's some, civilian volunteers who are like retired military or retired law enforcement or retired FBI or CIA or whatever. And I know, these are like Band-Aids to like a larger issue, which is, ensuring that people have proper background checks, both with criminal and medical backgrounds, and just ensuring that we're not giving firearms to individuals who are going to do these things. Now, what's interesting is that I'm sure most of these shootings are not done with like legally purchased firearms, or they acquired them legally. I think oftentimes we find that they were, purchased, out of somebody's trunk illegally, whatever the case may be, or, they stole them from a family member or friend, which is also sad because that tells us a lot more about that individual. But I got a lot of bullying when I was growing up. This was before, social media and stuff, but because I was taller than everybody. And nowadays it's really simple and easy to bully people because you can be more anonymous on these different social media sites, and you can easily create a page, like for, pennies on the dollar, you can create a website for practically free and have a I hate Karen on it from this high school and post a bunch of dumb, like very mean memes against that person, and it's like, I kind of feel like we need to figure out how to be better human beings with each other, especially when kids are that young. And this is, where I come down to, okay, well then how old should these individuals be before they get onto social media? I think it should be raised from 13 to 16. I mean, honestly, I think you should not, if it was a perfect world, well, we shouldn't have any of the social media, period. Or bring it up to like 18 or 21, but obviously that's quote unquote reasonable. But I'll meet you halfway. I will say I would rather young kids not need smartphones until they're 16. Like, I feel like they have to be 16 before they can sign up on these different applications, because I feel like anytime before that, man, kids are so confused as it is, especially with all the, the attacks on the family, attacks on sexuality, attacks on, like, especially on children. Like, they're confused enough already. We need to stop confusing them more, and they should just focus on trying to figure out how to be a good human being and what they're going to be in this world. And I scratch my head because I feel like school should be that place, but I feel like, especially, when I was growing up, in grade school and high school, I feel like it's just an institution to babysit your kids until you get home from work. And the institutions get a chance to manipulate the growth of that human being. This is my tinfoil hat, of course, so let me put that on really quick. And they don't really have a chance to, like, try different things. I think something that's really interesting is that when my little brother was going to high school, he got to actually do some internships with different programs and different companies who basically open their doors and say, hey, you want to learn how to frame and build a home? Okay, yeah. In the evenings after school for 2 or 3 hours, yeah, definitely, we'd love you to come by and we'll show you how to, like, read blueprints, show you how to properly use an air nail gun, how to get a right angle and those peaks on the homes. Or hey, you want to look into becoming an electrician and go into wiring and stuff like that? Yeah, absolutely. We'd love you to come down for a couple of hours a week and learn how to wire things. Like, I feel like what's really interesting is that there wasn't very many schools, hundreds, thousands of years ago. They just would learn different trades, find the trade that they like, and they just, like, went into that trade. And so they would trade their work for, for food or for shelter or for, whatever they needed. And I think it'd be really interesting to obviously come back to something like that. I really think that we need to start looking at the past and seeing some things that have worked really, really well that we've lost. And I think that's one of them, where we need to allow high school kids to start going into these different businesses. Oh, I want to be a graphic designer. Okay, great. We have a graphic designer school who will intern, kids for 8 hours a week or whatever is legally required to allow them to do so. And you can get credits for it, and it'll help you to understand if that's the industry you actually want to do. Hey, I have a local, producer who has a recording studio, just down the road, and I want to go into, film and music production. Oh, awesome. This guy will let you go down there and check it out. And I think if we get kids excited about their future, and we get the kids excited about what the possibilities are with their careers, not just, oh yeah, let's just import them into, said college here, get their piece of paper that says that they're smart in something, and then realize that that wasn't the thing that they wanted to do. I think we need to find people's passions, and I think people need to get passionate about this kind of stuff, because I think that if people are really passionate about the things that they want to accomplish in their lifetime and realize that it's really short and they need to get on it like right now, man, I think about where I could have been if I really stuck to the things that I wanted to do with my life when I was in my early and mid 20s. Because back then, like, I wanted to go into film. Like, I was really excited about film and music and production. And I just lost track of it because everybody was telling me I just needed to get that job, you know? I needed to get that job with that better pay. I needed to get over minimum wage. I needed to get $15, $18, $25 an hour. I was so stuck on that grind that I lost sight. And then I got older. And now, you know, my ideals have changed and my focus and passions have changed, you know, over time. But I wonder what it would have been like if I actually got into the stuff I was truly passionate about. Like if I would have continued on that path and like became, I think when I was in high school and I wanted to be a film director, like I wanted to be the next George Lucas. I wanted to be the next not George Lucas, but Steven Spielberg. I wanted to be the next Ron Howard. Like I wanted to be somebody who created beautiful art that people would just line up to sit down and watch and enjoy. And now I'm not there. I was stuck in that grind of trying to get the better job or just stay in a job that I actually liked, which is still difficult to this day. But now I really want to focus on my writing. Like if I can't be a director, you know, I can at least, you know, write the next film or the next book series that's going to be popular. Also would really love to have seen what I would have done if I actually focused and actually stuck with and persevered when I was into music and writing music. But right now, I am really passionate about these podcasts. Like I really want them to be good. I really want them to be enjoyable. I want people to listen to them and be like, oh, wow, that was really thought-provoking, or that was actually really fun, or, oh, that review was really interesting, you know? And hopefully it's entertaining. I mean, sometimes it's dark, like this particular subject was. I think my wife's singing. I should probably go upstairs and say hi to her. I think this is a good place to end right here. Like, in retrospect, like, we need to figure out how to raise kids in a way, because it's really difficult for parents these days. Like, most parents now have to have like 2 incomes, you know, so they're just working all day. By the time they get home, they don't want to raise their kids. You know, they just want to send them to school, and hopefully when they get home, they might have a few laughs, have some dinner, relax, and hey, how was your day? But anyway, hopefully you enjoyed our content today. If you have, please crush that like button and share this video with family and friends. Let's be better humans today than we were yesterday, and from our family to yours, good night.